All right, so we're back from our little break. So guys, what we're going to do now is we're going to play a little game before we go into chapter 9. We've already covered agency, and we've already covered basic contract law. So what I'm going to do is put you into teams. There's going to be 4 teams. You guys have the salmon-colored sticky notes, I believe, and so you're going to be the salmon-colored team. You're going to be the kind of green team. You guys have yellow and you guys have blue. And I want you guys to, the people in the front, turn to face the people behind you, and then you'll turn, Rosalind, and face, and then you girls will turn. And this is what I want you to do. I'm going to give you 7 minutes, and I want you to come up with as many examples of an actual violation of the fiduciary duty from a client, or to a client from a broker. And I want you to write some examples of a breach of contract, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a breach of a real estate contract, because we enter into contracts every day in real life. So any form of a breach of contract that you can think of, I want you to write examples of. And you can have one person on the team be your runner and go up and stick them on the board. And I'm going to give you guys like 7 minutes, and I'm going to walk around and kind of see what you guys are doing. And then at the end of the time, we're going to go over them and we're going to see what you guys came up with. And there'll be a prize at the end for the best ones. All right? So y'all ready? All right, you guys go ahead and turn. I don't want to waste any of your time while you're turning, so I won't start the clock until y'all turn around. Are you ready? Okay, you may start. Go.
Okay. So, trust and confidence. Okay. So, the first one, the agent duty.
So whatever you like,
Yeah, if you had like some of the actual like information about them.
yeah.
Well, is it the seller's agent?
You overachievers already put one on there.
They're always.
Is the fiduciary duty delivered?
Yes. Thanks.
No, look at you guys. You already had it. I'm getting everybody answer. You already had it.
Yeah. Okay, so hold on.
You should do well at that. You should do well at that.
Yeah. Prior to the yeah, exactly.
I could reach about
Yes, when they eat, they have to eat. I think if you disclosure.
I'm sorry. So I blocked you. Ooh, look at the boots. He's already got one on each side.
So I'm not disclosing where their money is.
Is Vivian your writer? Am I going to be able to read them? Yay!
Commingled or commingled funds.
Sorry, we are very talking. Just be like,
We are down to about 3.5 minutes. We're halfway.
I don't know if that was like words or. did not disclose negligent misconduct or willful omission. Not telling. Yes. Not disclosing that there's a bouncing built. So you're in contract with come in there, go take your stuff.
Yeah, it just depends. Yeah, see, everything you're getting was like I said, some people could go down.
Is that really
Yeah.
I always think it would be there would be lawful consent.
It was still.
That would be lawful consent. It would be
Okay, guys, we're down to 2 minutes and 30 seconds. So if you haven't written, make sure you get them up on the board. Ooh, the blue team is pulling out ahead. I know.
What's something you've done with the racing? Yeah. I heard. No. Technically a termination. Well, that's not a breach though. What's something you've done with racing and stuff? Yeah. There's a breach of contract. That's a breach of contract though. Because you bought the car and you
Financially, you ruined your financial.
Or not have good research.
We didn't do that on the breach.
Perfect. Okay, we're down to 1 minute. Look how fast it goes.
Hey, you would do a line. Do a line. That's available. How would you lie about your
Look, they've been hoarding. They've been hoarding their stickers over here. Wow, look at that. They were hoarding their stickers. They were just making y'all think they weren't ready. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we're done. Good job. Look how exciting! Some of you were ordering your little notes and making you think you didn't have any yet. Look, and guys, remember it's not always quantity. Sometimes it's just quality. But so, how did it help you to talk with each other about what is a breach of contract and what is a fiduciary duty? And you know, I was very impressed with y'all because I was coming around to give you some hints about remembering what your fiduciary duties are. And I got to brag on Jenna and Nina a little bit, and Rosalind. They had already written old card on one of their sticky notes to remind them what all of the fiduciary duties were. And so it made it easier for them to figure out what a violation of one was. So I want to do the violation of fiduciary duties first. And you guys did a really good job because I've been looking at them while y'all were writing and walking around. And my salmon team had a really good one. It says a seller's agent tells the buyer's agent how low the seller will go on their price. Are you allowed to do that if you're representing the seller? That's not good, right? That would be definitely a violation of which fiduciary duty do you think that would be a violation of? Loyalty and confidentiality, which go hand in hand. Those two things go so hand in hand. Being loyal to someone and keeping their secrets to yourself, that's really, really hand in hand with each other. And my blue team over here said failure to disclose a dump being built next to a property that the buyer is interested in. Would that be a material fact? Would that be something that you wanted to know?
Yeah.
That somebody was putting in a landfill next to your property? Absolutely, that would be an absolute violation of your fiduciary duty. Let's see, what did my green team? Oh, woo, y'all did good. You got what I didn't expect anybody to touch on. The broker put the earnest money deposit into his personal account. Oh, did you have that one too? I'm sorry. I'm very excited about it. Did you? Oh, here it is. Well, you said you didn't deposit within.
No,
Oh, the blue. I'm sorry.
with a creative twist.
Oh, is it on this
For
side?
creative points.
All right, good, great.
No, it's probably a fiduciary duty.
Oh, is it? Is
Yeah.
it? I'm
Next
sorry.
second
Hang on.
one.
Oh, here we go. Putting clients' escrow deposits into personal slush funds account towards the purchase of a Bengal tiger. Ooh, that's good. They told us what the broker used it for. So, guys, that's very good. Which fiduciary duty did they violate? Accounting. Accounting for someone's money. You cannot take someone's money and put it into your own personal account. What's it called? Co-mingling. Good job. You did. You wrote co-mingling. Oh, my salmon team's got co-mingling earnest money. See? Look, you know what? I'm so impressed with that because I really thought that no one would mention violating the fiduciary duty of accounting. I really thought that would be one that you guys might overlook. And you all did it. That's amazing to me. Everybody might get a free snack and drink now.
Oh, I like
I'm really impressed. Because people don't think about that one as much unless they're the BIC. They don't think about that as much unless they're the BIC, but you guys did. You all thought about the fact that you should not mess with somebody's money. And that's really, that's great because you guys are thinking about all of the fiduciary responsibilities of the agent. Let's do another one. Ooh, I love that. Salmon. My salmon team. The seller's agent doesn't advertise the property at all. That actually would be this as well.
Oh, double.
You got a double with that one. Because are you supposed to be taking care of your client's needs?
Yes.
You are. And part of your fiduciary duties is to help them promote their property and be loyal to them and whatever. But it's also a breach of contract if you don't. And you're going to know that more today because here on your tables, when we go through these, you've got a listing agreement in here. And we're going to talk about what the seller's agent is supposed to do for a seller, which it was in the brochure when we went through the Working with Real Estate Agents brochure. It says I'm going to help promote your property and do these things. But it's much more detailed in the listing agreement. So you guys got one that actually goes right here because it's both. You're violating your duties and you're breaching your contract with your seller. All right, oh, you know what? I love this. And the reason I love this, yellow team, is I actually received a phone call about this exact thing from someone locally. The broker did not disclose information about a future Walmart to be constructed across the street from a property. When the new Walmart went in Richlands, one of my students called me because she had a family member who had bought a piece of property across the street and no one had said anything to them about the Walmart going in, and now they were very unhappy because they were concerned about the traffic and things like that. So she called me and asked me, did the agent have to tell them that? And I said, well, it really depends. And when we talked about it, the family had bought that property before the talk of the Walmart had really come about and anybody knew it was coming. But if I was a buyer's agent, especially if the buyer had said to me, you know, it's really, really important to us that we're not in an area where there's going to be a lot of traffic, you know, we have children, we have pets, you know, that would be, you know, something that, you know, you would have to do more research on if someone made that a material fact to you. And some of these things that we're talking about that are violations of our fiduciary duties, what's something else that these would fall under? What other categories that we did our game the other day on that you had your willful and negligent misrepresentation and omission? So some of these things that are a violation of your fiduciary duties are also examples of willful and negligent misrepresentation or willful and negligent omission of a material fact. So see how it all, I told y'all that it would start getting better when we got to this part. Because it starts taking all of these things you're learning and tying them together. Right? Let's look at some of our breach of contracts. I can tell when Adam's on a team. The buyer went out and bought a new race car prior to closing on their contract. You guys all said, all of you, because I watched when you all were writing, every single one of you said something about a buyer buying something prior to settlement, prior to closing. And guys, the one thing that...
That was not me, that was actually the girls.
Oh, the girls came up, well, you gave them that inspiration because they know that you like race cars. But guys, we all know that a buyer makes a promise to whom that they will not obtain any new credit. The lender. That they're not going to go buy anything on credit, that they're not going to go and do anything that will alter their debt to income ratio. And absolutely buying a race car or any car or going and getting that furniture that, you know, don't worry Adam, we still love you even though we know you sell furniture to buyers. So you know, let's see. Buyer changed their mind about buying the property after the offer was accepted and after what date had passed? DREI, absolutely great. Due diligence date has passed. Remember, we haven't got into the sales contract exactly yet, but we talked about it and hit on it when we talked about different things. So we know that the buyer has a time frame to back out without having a penalty. But if we go past that due diligence date and the buyer backs out without a legal excuse, that's a breach of contract. And when you guys were talking, and I don't know if anybody wrote it, but when you guys were talking, right here, here's one of them. This was one that I heard Bree say, and they put it on here. You are in a lease that says no pets are allowed, and you get a pet. And you know what, Jenny said something, and she kind of said it like as a joke, and then I said, no, that's right, because I said, what are some other breaches of contract? And she said, like with your cell phone company. I said, absolutely. If you have a contract with a cell phone company that you have to stay in this contract for a certain amount of time, or there's a penalty, if you stop paying it, or the gym. How many people have ever signed up for a gym and then realized, I'm not going? And so, you know, but you sign a contract. They sign a contract as well. So if you showed up at your gym and every time you showed up at your gym they were closed, even though their hours were open, said they were open, or every time you showed up at the gym half the equipment was broken, do you think they might be breaching? See, we enter into contracts every single day in real life. And you don't think about it as much until you come in here and we learn about what your duties are as a party to a contract. What your duties are when you make a promise. You make a legally enforceable promise. And anytime anybody breaks that legally enforceable promise without a right, a good reason, it's a breach of contract. And y'all enter into contracts every day and don't even think about it.
What's something that, like, us as an agent?
Tori said, what would be something that us as an agent could do that would breach our duties, our contract with a buyer or seller? And that's a fantastic question, because you need to know this, because you're going to be going out there and doing this. So if I were a buyer's agent, and we're going to go through these agency agreements today and it'll make a lot more sense. If I were a buyer's agent, in our buyer agency agreement, it tells the things that I am responsible for as my duties to you as a buyer. And to show you properties, to help you get pre-qualified with a lender, to help you present offers and type up your offer and advise you on things that are going on here, educate you on our real estate market here. So if I was never available to go show you anything, every time you wanted to go look at properties, I was like, I'm busy. Bree and I are going to lunch. Ellery and I are going baby clothes shopping. If I was never available to you as your buyer's agent, that would be a breach. And if I helped you write your offer and then did nothing after that, I took your offer, I presented it to the listing agent, the seller accepted your offer, yay, we have a contract, and then I just stopped talking to you. I expected you to figure out all the things you needed to do between now and settlement on your own. That would be a breach. And like I said, one of the ones here, I'm the listing agent and I don't advertise your property at all. I just stick a sign in your yard and throw a lockbox on it. Oh yeah, I managed to put it in the MLS, but I only put about half the information in there. I didn't even go out and get accurate measurements. That would be a breach to my seller. Adam.
We forgot, I thought, a good one, as far as the buyer have obligations too. If every time the agent calls up, the buyer's agent calls up, and they don't have time to look at a house, and that's a continuous action on the behalf of the buyer, then that would also be an example of breach of contract.
Absolutely. Adam's absolutely right. They owe duties to you as well. What if your seller never lets you show the house? Every time you call and say someone would like to show the property, they go, it's a bad time. Every time. When we read through these agency agreements today, you're going to see that one of the seller's duties is to have the property be available for showing at reasonable times with reasonable notice. So if they never ever let the property be shown, that would not be them holding up their end of the bargain. So see, it's amazing now that you've got that thought process going, how much easier it is to understand when somebody would breach. And it's not just us, they can breach. And we get into the sales contracts when we come back from our Easter break next week and we come back and talk about the actual offer to purchase and contract between the buyer and the seller. There's so many things that are spelled right out in there that everybody's duties are, what their promises are. And if anybody breaks the promise, it's a breach of contract. Jenna.
Okay, so the client's duties to us is to be truthful and to compensate for whatever agreed upon thing. But how would they breach that if they're using like financing and it all comes out in the end unless they're paying cash? Is that the only way that they would be able to violate that?
That's a great question, but we're going to talk more today, but who is responsible in most cases for paying the commission? The seller, right? And the seller's not getting any financing. The seller promises in our listing agreement to give us compensation. And the seller agrees then, remember we talked about on Monday, the seller then has to agree how they're going to allow us to share that compensation with whomever brings the buyer. And then the buyer would be responsible for paying if the seller refused to pay a buyer's agent. So one of the duties to us is to compensate us for our duties, and we have our agency contracts that we're going to go through today that stipulates what can happen if they don't do that. And you know, most often, as we said, it's the seller paying that compensation. I can't say that a buyer has never paid a commission, because they can be responsible for paying a commission. Because what if I was working with a buyer and they were interested in a for sale by owner, and we had a signed buyer agency agreement, and the for sale by owner said, no, I'm not compensating a real estate agent. That's why I'm selling the house myself. Well, then the buyer agency agreement you're going to see today when we go through it, it says to the buyer, this is what I expect to get paid for helping you. And I'm going to seek that compensation from the seller, either directly or through the listing firm if the property is listed with a firm. And then the very next paragraph says, but if the seller is not offering compensation to the buyer's agent, or the compensation is less than what I have stated here, then you're going to have to pay me the difference.
Okay,
Alexis.
so on like a short sale, when the owner or the seller of the house owes more on it than what it's worth, and the bank is going to have to pay that extra like gap. Now, would the realtor go back on him, or would she just like automatically come back on us? Because he would literally have to probably pay it out of pocket.
I love that Alexis always has these questions about the short sales, because she's in the middle of one. She's in the middle of one right now, so she has a lot of knowledge about short sales, and that's a great question. When we are in a short sale, the lien holders make an agreement with the seller of what they're willing to do. And one of those things is what they're willing to pay in compensation. And so that's all spelled out in the beginning, so the agents don't get down to the end and go, what do you mean we're not getting paid? So the lien holders have to agree up front of whatever their deficit is going to be, including buyer's closing cost assistance, because I'm sure you asked for buyer's closing cost assistance. See, they're paying all of her closing costs. And she also, they had to address the broker's commission and things like that. So all of that is addressed, and the lien holders have to take that all into consideration before they approve the short sale. And that's why it can take a little bit of time, because they've got to make sure that everybody who has a right to those funds is agreeable. Bree.
For a breach of contract, I know we wrote this down, but I just want to ask to make sure. When you give a mortgage to a mortgage company and they give you the money, you have a contract with them to upkeep the property, or else you're breaching, correct? And they can foreclose on that.
I love that. Bree says, one of the things that a borrower promises when they obtain a loan from a mortgage company is that they will maintain the property in good condition and keep it up, or else the bank can foreclose. That's absolutely right. Remember, we said the borrower is responsible for paying the principal and interest payment, keeping the taxes paid, which is why most lenders say, let me have it, keeping adequate insurance on the property to protect the lender and the borrower's interest, which again, that's why the lender says, let me have that, I'll hold it in escrow and I'll pay it for you. And to keep the property in good repair, and to get authorization from the lender before making any major alterations, because they want to make sure that you're doing so down the right, you're using the right channels, you're getting your permits, you're, you know, if need be, you're getting a licensed contractor, whatever needs to happen to make sure that it's done and doesn't harm the value of the property for the lender, because the lender wants to make sure you're not going to take away their collateral. And if you make the property, you know, where it's not sellable, because remember I told you the example, the people built the room addition, but they built it over top of the septic tank because they didn't get their permits. And so since they didn't get their permits and they didn't do it correctly, they breached the contract with the lender. The lender could have foreclosed. Of course, the lender doesn't want it back now because they now have a property with a room addition on top of a septic tank. But they violated, they had a breach of contract with their lender. Guys, you did great, and I think everybody should get a free drink or a free snack. So at some point today, everybody gets a free drink or a free snack, and we're going to look at all of these others today as we go through the chapters, because you guys did fantastic. I'm impressed. I'm very impressed. You were brilliant. Yeah, of course I knew.
Brilliant minds.
Oh, what is it?
No, I didn't.
Oh, what'd you say?
Brilliant minds.
Brilliant minds. Yeah. So does it help when we do something like that to help you connect the dots of what is a breach and what is a fiduciary duty and things like that? Great. And remember, even though we've changed the label up here for the game, the parking lot's still there. So anytime you have a question, you can put it in the parking lot. And I really encourage you guys, when we take our break in a little bit, that you come up and look at these things. So now we're going to roll into chapter 9, which is on page 178 in your textbook, and it's agency contracts. Since we've already covered agency, and we've already covered basic contract law, now we're going to take those two and put them together and talk about agency contracts themselves. And as I said, I gave you all a copy this morning, and I made sure they're hole punched so you can put them in your notebooks and take them with you today. So on page 178, it says your learning objectives for this chapter are to be able to describe the different types of agency contracts and the procedures for using them, identify the different types of compensation and disclosure requirements, understand how to be entitled to and calculate compensation, describe the typical listing process, including calculations for seller's net and minimum sales price, and understand the requirements for the North Carolina Residential Property Disclosure Act. So today we will be learning 2 more T-bars. We're going to learn how to calculate commission, which always makes people excited. That's always fun. And then we get to figure out how to calculate a seller's net. Because when a seller wants to sell their property, they sometimes say, this is what I want to make. On top of everything else I have to pay, can we do that? And then we have to figure out how we help the seller figure out what their property is worth. And when we get to chapter 17, which is real property valuation, and we talk about the appraisal process, we're going to talk in more detail about what's called a comparative market analysis, which is what we do for sellers to help them come up with a probable selling price. And that's one of the things that you really need to understand when you get into the reality of this business, because if you incorrectly help a seller price their property, you could be violating your fiduciary duties, because you could lead them to believe their property was worth way more than it is, and then it will sit on the market for a long time because it's overpriced. Or you could do the other way and put the property on for so low that the seller doesn't actually get what he could have received for that property because you had it underpriced, and then the appraisal comes in much higher and the seller ends up missing out on some proceeds. So it's really important that you understand how to help a seller value their property, as far not value, come up with a probable selling price, so that when the appraiser values the property, that you're close. So we're going to learn about the appraisal process and how the appraisers do it, so that you can understand better how to help your seller come up with a probable selling price for their property. The terminology for this chapter is also listed. These are all the terms that you're going to be able to define when we get finished with this chapter. The first thing that we're going to talk about is that listing agreements and buyer agency agreements are not real estate contracts. And we talked about this on Monday. They're employment contracts. And we talked about the fact that absolutely everything with the seller has to what? Right from the beginning has to be what?
In writing.
In writing. Very good. Chaplain on it. Everything with our seller has to be in writing from the beginning. Because the seller's stuff is a lot more complicated than the buyer. A buyer can walk in and do a verbal buyer agency agreement with you and say, I want to go look at houses and I don't want to spend more than $150,000 and I need this many bedrooms and this many bathrooms. Okay, that we can do pretty simply without having to put it all down on paper. But when we're listing a house for a seller, everything has to be in writing from its formation. And on page 179, it tells you that North Carolina Real Estate Commission rule says we have to have our listing agreements in writing from their formation. Some other things that are required is that they have to be signed by everyone who has interest in that property Or else we can't, if I only get the wife to sign the listing agreement and the husband does not, and then we get an offer on the property, the husband has no obligation to agree to sign because he never agreed to sell. So it's really important that we know who the sellers are when we list a property. And we talked about that when we talked about, title and deed. And we do a title search, and I told you, you can go and pull up the public records and look and see who it says are the owners of this property, so you make sure you're getting the right people to sign. And when you go on a listing appointment, you need to make sure you've looked at that deed so that when you get there, you go, are you these people? I need to make sure that you're the right people. Because like I said, sometimes we have issues where...
Do you ask for an ID, or what would you...
We typically ask for IDs on buyers when they come to the office. That's more of a safety issue, and we'll talk about that when we talk about our realtor safety. But I don't normally card sellers. I will just say, if the paperwork said, Bree, what's your husband's name? Mark. If the deed says that the owners were Mark and Bree, then I'm going to go, you guys are Mark and Bree, right? And because like I said, when we were talking about transfer of title and deeds, sometimes people get divorced and they don't get their name off the deed. And then someone gets remarried, and so the deed has the first wife's name still on it, but the second wife is now the person who's married and is going to be selling the property. And that can quick claim, she said, see, look at that. She instantly thought of quick claim deed. We need the first wife to quick claim her rights away, or else she's going to have to be, So we have to pay attention. We have to pull up that deed and make sure that the people are the right people. You have to put your license number on the listing agreements. We have to put our license number, guys, on everything that we give anybody. The Working with Real Estate Agents brochure has a place for your license number. The listing agreement and the buyer agency agreement. Why do you think we need to give them our license number?
In case they want to complain.
Yeah, Adam, yes. In case they need to file a complaint against you. Because does anybody ever go by something other than their legal name sometimes? So what if I was going by a alias? Maybe Brenda was my middle name. And I went by my middle name. And so someone called up the real estate commission. They said, this lady named Brenda Hunter, she was terrible. And I wasn't in their system as Brenda Hunter because Brenda was my middle name. They have my license number. They know who I am. And the commission can find out really quick and know who it is that they're calling about. You need to be able to let people know that, hey, if you're not happy with me, there's someone you can call. Because the real estate commission is there to protect them. And guys, every single listing agreement and every written buyer agency agreement, which is also an employment contract, must have a definite termination date. You have to let them know when their obligation to you or your obligation to them is over. You can't have an open-ended agency agreement. I actually went on a listing once when I was a new agent. And I said to the seller, we need to decide how long we want this relationship to last. And he said, well, can't we just put in there until the house sells? I said, that would be fantastic for me, horrible for you if I was a bad agent. Because if I wasn't doing my job and you're stuck in a contract with me until the house sells, that would be horrible. I may never get it sold. And I said, no. I said, our rules require that every agreement has to have a start date and an end date. And I always get the question, well, how long should it be for? That's always going to be dependent on the market. If it's taking 280 days for properties in this neighborhood to sell because the market's a little slow, then you obviously would not want to do a 6-month listing. That would only be 180 days, and your listing would probably expire before we ever found a buyer for the property, and then, the seller may or may not extend it or renew it. So you have to do your homework and see, based on the market. If properties are selling quickly in an area, then you may be willing to do a 6-month listing. And that's one of the things you'll talk about with brokers when you go in for training. What are we doing right now? What's going on in the market? Because it changes. I've been in the business for 16 years, and I've had times where we had listing agreements that were 6 months or less even. And then I've had sometimes where we've had to have them be for more than a year. So it just depends on the market. Okay? Now, we talked about a little bit about sign crossing. We talked about it a little bit already. Soliciting the business of clients that are actively listed with another firm is called sign crossing. And it is unethical, and you could be subjecting yourself to a lawsuit. You are not allowed under our Realtor Code of Ethics. I can't call up Adam and go, "Hi Adam, my name's Brenda. I know you have your property listed with Michael, but I think I'm a much better agent than he is, and I think you should fire him and hire me." Under our Realtor Code of Ethics, that is not allowed. And he could probably sue me if I did that. It's not a violation of our law, but it is a violation of the Realtor Code of Ethics. And as I told you, even though we don't all have to become realtors, if you join a firm that is a member, then you'll have to be a member and join that. Tori.
So again, I was confused. Is it you don't have to be a realtor to be a broker, but you have to be a broker to be a realtor?
Absolutely perfect. You said it perfect, Tori.
Okay.
You don't have to be a realtor just because you're a broker. But you have to be a broker if you want to be a realtor. Perfect. You got it exactly right. You didn't get it backwards. Jenny, did you have a question, baby? No? You good? Okay. So now, one of the other things having to do with solicitation is that do not call registry. We all know what it's like to get those phone calls from someone if you haven't gotten your number on the do not call list. There are some exceptions for real estate brokers. If Michael was my client, I'm allowed to contact him for up to 18 months after our transaction ends, even if he is on the do not call registry. Now, if he tells me to stop calling, should I stop calling? I absolutely should. Because anytime someone tells you to stop contacting them, you should stop contacting them. But I'm allowed to contact him even if he's on the do not call registry for up to 18 months after our relationship has ended because we've already closed on the transaction. Now, let's say someone went to your website and sent you an inquiry, "I'm interested in this property." Then you're allowed to contact them for up to 3 months after that inquiry. Again, if they tell you to stop, you stop. Okay? If they tell you to stop, you stop. It's so funny. You'll find out, guys, when you get in there. A lot of times you'll see the phone number come through and it says their phone number is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They don't want to give you the phone number because they're afraid you're going to nag them to death. And if you are going to be doing calling, you're going to have to check the do not call registry regularly to make sure that people are not on that list. And just because a for sale by owner puts a sign in their yard with their phone number on it does not give you the right to call them if they're on the do not call registry unless you actually have a buyer interested in the property. You can't call them to solicit their business. That doesn't leave them open for that. Now, if you actually had a buyer interested, obviously you would have to call them. But by putting their phone number on a sign in their yard does not take away the fact that they're on the do not call registry. Make sense? Doesn't leave them open for harassment. We also have rules, guys, about junk faxes. Most of the rules about junk faxes apply more to people with a business, because not too many people have a fax number at home that's publicized somewhere. I can remember when I had my own real estate company, we would get all of these advertisements for people wanting, selling a vacation or timeshares or whatever, fax. And it would just wear out the ink in our fax machine. So when they came up with this, we could put our fax lines on this list, and then we can't get junk faxes either. It's so sad for me to realize that, you know, that faxing is kind of becoming obsolete already. I can remember when it was a new fad. And now it's becoming obsolete because of what? Email. And guess what? We have rules about that. They call it canned spam. The Canned Spam Act restricts email spamming. That's why you have that little button at the top of your email where you can click. If you get something that you don't want, you can click mark as spam. And you know what it does? After that, when you get those, it'll go straight to your spam. You didn't know that?
I know we just delete them. I don't know, like,
Oh,
once
it's
they keep
great.
coming, they go into
Yeah,
spam.
well, you can click the button that says mark this as spam, and then your email provider will shoot it straight to your spam box. Your spam box, I know. No, not the canned meat one. And guys, the last thing before we take our break, because it's related, the only form of solicitation that real estate brokers can do without any limitation on it is the U.S. mail. I can mail a postcard or a letter to anyone I want to mail, and there's no. Now, I would be nice if you called me up and you said, please stop sending me these postcards. I would stop sending them to you because that would be the right thing to do. I'd take you off the mailing list. But you can mail things. How many of you get mail on a regular basis from real estate brokers? They're offering you services. They say, hey, look, let me do a market analysis for you. Or, hey, have you ever thought of selling your investment property? Or things like that. And now that you're learning so much in here about what's in the public record, that's how they know. I can pull up all the property records for our area, and if it says that your property address, Jenna, is 102 Goober Lane, but your mailing address is 106 6th Avenue, do I know she doesn't live in this property? Because her mailing address is 106 6th Avenue, but she owns this property at 102 Goober Lane, so what could I probably assume by that? She moved, and she still owns this property. So what type of property is it probably? A rental. Maybe she might want to put it under property management. So all these records are available, and that's why you get all these things in your mail. Because agents want to know if you're interested in their services.
And how do they get that? That's off the deed? Like when you go on the...
Or the tax records. Adam said you get that from the deed, or you can go to the tax records.
The
When
GIS.
Yeah, and the GIS. So I owe you all a break. I'm sure everybody's ready to stretch your legs and take a break. Jenna, if you'll hit our button for me. Come back at 10 minutes after 11, and we'll keep on talking.